Father Solanus Casey was a man of gratitude. He was, from all appearances, a normal American young man, grew up on a farm in Wisconsin in the late 1800s. He was the son of Irish immigrants, grew up in a family of 10 boys and 6 girls. He loved baseball and hot dogs. As a young man, he left the farm and worked in various jobs: a logger, a hospital orderly, a streetcar operator, and a prison guard. He nearly became engaged to a young woman, but sensed a call from the Lord to become a priest. And he first began to study for the diocesan priesthood, but after his undergraduate studies, he entered the Capuchin Franciscan order, because as we know, not everyone can become a diocesan priest. Sure, he was listening to the Lord and his vocation. And he was ordained a simplex priest. I'll explain that a little bit later. He was ordained a simplex priest in 1904 and was assigned as the porter of his friary. As you know, the porter is the one that answered the door when people came making inquiries. And Father Solanus spent his life in service of people. And as the porter, he met thousands of people from every age and walk of life, earned the recognition as the doorkeeper, always ready to listen to anyone at any time, day or night. Father Solanus Casey was a priest of gratitude. When people would come to him, and they often did, they would come with their problems, their difficulties, and he would listen, he would offer counsel, but he had this constant bit of advice that he would tell all those people. He would tell them to ask the Lord for help, and then to thank him immediately for answering their prayers. He phrased it this way. He said, "Thank God ahead of time. Before we are even aware that he has answered this prayer, we're thanking him for answering that prayer." And it's not like we can see it in terms of kind of like, it's not like twisting God's arm, right? You're not going to force God's hand. But what it is, it's a tremendous act of trust and abandonment, that we give to the Lord our problem, our difficulty, our intention, and then immediately thank him for answering that prayer. This was Father Solanus Casey, his main bit of advice. And it's funny that his superiors soon began to notice that there were hundreds of people coming to the friary, but they never went past the front door. They all wanted to talk to Father Casey. And he did this very humble work of meeting with people. He did it in New York City, Detroit, and Indiana. Thousands of miracles were reported from his prayers and his meetings. And that when he died in 1957, thousands more miracles were reported. And he's buried at St. Bonaventure Monastery in Detroit, and he's already been declared blessed, right? The final stages before canonization. We have parishioners in the parish. Her grandmother actually knew Father Solanus Casey in Detroit, and she gave to the parish a bead of one of his rosaries. And we have it as a second-class relic, hopefully pretty soon, and that we keep in the sacristy of the church. Thank God ahead of time. Gratitude. Today, Jesus teaches us about the importance of gratitude. Can you imagine the suffering of those lepers? Not only did they suffer from a horrible and fatal disease, but they were also total outcasts. They were alone, left to themselves to literally experience their flesh rot from their bodies. And they came to Jesus begging for a healing, and he restores them. But only one returned to give thanks to him. And Jesus praises this Samaritan's gratitude. Father Solanus said, "Thank God ahead of time." Gratitude is absolutely necessary to become holy. And gratitude is also an antidote against bitterness. Nothing is quite as deadly in the spiritual life as bitterness. Bitterness poisons the soul by not dealing with our feelings of anger and sadness and burying them deep inside where they ossify and they harden the heart. Bitterness turns us inward, cutting us off from the love of God. And Blessed Solanus had reason to become an angry and bitter man. He was told before his ordination that he would be ordained only a simplex priest. Now this state of we don't have them anymore, but a simplex priest, simplex Latin word simply meaning simple, a simple priest. A simplex priest was a priest who could offer mass, but was judged unsuitable to preach or to hear confessions. So those more things that require a lot more perhaps theological understanding or so that ability to speak publicly. Now, some biographers write that this choice of his superiors was due to Father Solanus' struggle with his studies. He did struggle as a student. But they also write that the choice was also due in part to prejudice within the community, an ethnic prejudice. The community of this particular group of Capuchins were of German descent, and, as we just heard, Father Casey was Irish. In any case, the judgment was made, and Father Solanus accepted the decision with gratitude. He was thankful to God for everything that happened to him, including perhaps being treated unfairly. Gratitude can help us find the Lord in every moment of our lives. And being a simplex priest and putting him as the porter allowed the Lord to work mightily in him. Who knows? Perhaps if he had not been ordained a simplex priest, he would not have met with all those people. And that suffering perhaps made him more humble so that the power of God could work more powerfully in his life. He may have been a simplex priest, but he became a saint. And this brings us to another point about gratitude. Gratitude is a choice. Whether we are thankful or not is up to us. With the ups and downs of life, which every human life has, we can be thankful to the Lord, or we can withdraw into ourselves and become bitter. Father Solanus chose to become grateful, and he encouraged others to make the same choice, to offer your prayer to God and to thank him ahead of time. And if we find ourselves bitter, we can take that risk to begin to be grateful, because those small acts of gratitude begin to chip away and to break up the hardness of our hearts, to open our hearts up to the torrent of divine grace that Jesus is always showering upon us. So how grateful are we? Right, husbands and wives, when was the last time you thanked your spouse for marrying you? When was the last time you thanked your spouse for something that they said or did well? Children, when was the last time you thanked your dad and mom for something? Right, these two simple words, thank you, can have a profound effect upon us in our spiritual lives. And the more grateful we are to the Lord and to each other, the greater the harmony and peace in our families, the increase of holiness in our hearts. And the best way to show gratitude is what we're doing right now, participating in Holy Mass. We rightly call the Mass the Eucharist, which, as we know, is that Greek word for thanksgiving. Holy Mass is one massive act of thanksgiving. We don't go to Mass with the attitude, what am I getting out of it? Rather, we participate in the Mass out of gratitude. We go to Mass because we're so grateful to God, and we want to enter into his sacrifice, the primordial Eucharist, the primordial thanksgiving of the Son to the Father, which is from all eternity, that the Son, his very being is Eucharistic, of thanksgiving in being begotten by the Father for all eternity, and that his being is one of thanksgiving to the Father. And this is what we do here. This is what we are called to do as members of his body. We show our gratitude to the Lord for who he is, first of all, and for what he is doing in my life. And that's what I mean when I talk about being a Eucharistic parish, that we're characterized by thanksgiving. Just noticing that we had our Thursday adoration all day long. It was beautiful. We had people in the church all day long. I was checking every once in a while with our security cameras. There's a couple people that had signed up to commit themselves, but there was always 4 or 5, 6 people in the church. And when we came to do benediction at 6 o'clock, there were 20 people in the church. It's beautiful. This way of being in the presence of the Lord. Another example, too, I was talking to one of our parishioners. We were talking about generosity a couple weeks ago, and this parishioner is very committed. The parishioner gives 10% of what she brings in. And I asked her about it. I said, well, why do you do that? She said, because I'm thankful. I'm so grateful to God for what he gives me. And the more I give, the more it shows up. It's just that she sees this, that her generosity comes from her gratitude for what God is doing in her life. And gratitude can help us walk through very difficult circumstances in life. We celebrate this, and we are remembering this month in October, Respect Life Month. And our Life is Sacred committee in the parish have put up 2 very beautiful displays at the entrances to the church. And I was thinking about this recently as I was visiting one of our parish families who has a special needs daughter and who requires full-time care. In fact, she lives at the Child Center at Providence Hospital for medically fragile children. And I spent the morning with them a couple Saturdays ago, and I was just very, very moved by the visit. First of all, so here's a girl, 8 years old, very much incapacitated, in the eyes of the world, that she has no value. There's nothing she's going to contribute in the eyes of the world. And yet, I watched as she had this killer smile. She could express herself in that way, and it was just beautiful to see the interaction of her younger siblings with her, and it's just how they included her, how they talked to her and interacted with her, and I would literally could sense it in my own self of being around her. She just pulls love out, just calls it forth from everyone around her. I thought, that is her mission in life. She has a mission in this world, and her mission is to draw love out of us. And this world would be a much darker place if she was there, if she wasn't there. And this is what we have to think about these things, about something that's very uncomfortable to talk about in our society. And that is, what is it, the difficulty that some parents have when they become pregnant and they get an adverse prenatal diagnosis? There is fear and there is pressure to not let that child live. Why? Because it'll be difficult and there will be suffering. This is why today we don't see people with Down syndrome much anymore, because 90% of them are not allowed to be born. That says something profoundly sad about our culture that is so fearful about need. These children have a mission in this world, and the world is darker because they are not here. And I was just so moved by the example of this particular family, because it is not easy, and yet it is beautiful. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I tell you what, the effect that she had on me is still with me a couple weeks later. There's just a joy that she exudes and is contagious. And I go about my day and I think like, oh, all these problems I think I have, like, there's no reason to complain, right? Things are good. We can be grateful, to thank God ahead of time. So if we find ourselves in the darkness of having been a part of some of those terrible choices that are made out of fear and pressure to abort a child that may have special needs. Then it's time to come forward for healing, because Jesus and his church want this reconciliation and want the mercy and forgiveness, because the church is a field hospital that brings healing and grace and restoration. Jesus is calling us to follow him with gratitude. Gratitude breaks down bitterness. Gratitude is a choice. And we can be grateful no matter how difficult life's circumstances are. We show our gratitude in Holy Mass and in the way we welcome and cherish each and every human life, especially those that come about in difficult circumstances. Gratitude turned Solanus Casey into a saint, where he would pray to God and to thank God ahead of time for answering his prayers. This allowed Jesus to work wonderful deeds through him, and he can do it through us too. Let's thank God ahead of time.